What is up, basketball fans? Welcome to a live edition of the NBA Outlet. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron, special guest, Jac Manuell. What's up, fellas? How we doing?
This is my face.
How's it going, guys?
Peace.
I see you guys in person now over messaging. I like it.
It's not as good as the live show we just did, behind me in Stanford a couple of weeks ago. But, we got plenty to talk about today. NBA All-Star starters drop, a couple injuries to talk about, and then the games tonight. As always, quick reminder, check out the NBA Outlet podcast, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, Dash Radio, and YouTube. But, guys, let's get right into the starters. We'll start with the West. Steph Curry, James Harden, LeBron James, Paul George, Kevin Durant. Any guys you disagree with, or you like everybody in those picks?
None whatsoever. Luka Doncic isn't there. Derrick Rose isn't there. Enough said. I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I mean, all these guys are all-star candidates. I mean, they all played to be all-star starters. Anthony Davis not making it is probably kind of questionable. But Paul George has been fantastic. And I'm actually kind of glad that there's not a power forward or a center that, just five guys can make it.
If you had to say who was snubbed more, who would it be, AD or Jokic?
AD.
Jokic, because the Denver Nuggets are second in the conference. They're second in the conference.
Yeah,
and you nailed his name.
Did I?
Yeah, you did.
Hey, we're live. That's why. See,
my presence. It's my presence. The camera's in front of him. I get why people would say Jokic and Kory for that matter, but the lapse in his form throughout the season, I remember the games where he was putting up 5 shots and had 3 assists or whatever it might be. Whereas Anthony Davis just consistently puts up 35 and 15 like no one else's business. And I get that the Denver Nuggets have been more successful, but they have a deeper roster. If you're the New Orleans Pelicans, you've got Tim Frazier contributing. Nikola Mirotic just missed 20 games. Julius Randle, Jahlil Okafor is out there putting up buckets. So I understand. I think you could make a claim for either one. And I think when it comes down to all NBA selections, I think that's where it's going to get really tricky.
What about you, Kory?
I just think Jokic, even though he has had some lapses in form, just because they've been in the top seed for the most of the time in the Western Conference this season, and then obviously now they're the second seed. I just think that should weigh a little bit. But you make a great point, Anthony Davis. What's he had this year? He's had 34. You guys saw 34 and 6 in person or whatever he had that one night.
Correct.
And he caught a mean L that night too, and he put up big numbers.
He never disappears. Anthony Davis is there every night. When he's on the floor, there is nobody better than Anthony Davis from the power forward position and maybe even the center position, depending on where you actually see him.
And if we're making an argument for the West, which guy would you possibly take off? Would it be LeBron since he missed so much time, or that's just impossible because he's LeBron?
It probably would be LeBron. I think if you're just going off who has the most valid claim, who's been the most consistent throughout the season, it would probably be LeBron James. But again, are you going to take off, one of the greatest players of all time and, one of the most popular players in the history of the game? No, obviously not. But you can't take off Stephen Curry, LeBron, and you can't take off Kevin Durant and Paul George and James Harden either. The fans almost did with their voting. But I think LeBron would probably be the logical case to probably put out.
If we take away who the person is, they probably shouldn't have the starting spot, right? For Curry and LeBron. If you base it off how many games they've missed, they probably shouldn't be. But because of who they are and their impact when they're actually on the floor, I understand why they are starters. But personally, they probably shouldn't be, realistically.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. If you took away the name, they might not necessarily be there, but obviously they're 2 of the top 5 players in the NBA, so we kind of want them there. Moving on to the East, unless you guys have anything else you want to say about the West?
I'm good.
You're good? All right, it's cool because I can see your facial reactions, and I'm not used to that. Over to the East, we got Kyrie Irving, no surprise, Kemba Walker, Antetokounmpo, Kawhi, and Embiid. Obviously, the surprise here is kind of Kemba, right?
Yeah. It's somewhat surprising, but I would probably have had him in my starters as well. Funnily enough, I didn't actually vote because the system was so flawed and illogical. I just wanted to do hashtag NBA vote. I think I did a hashtag NBA vote for D'Angelo Russell. Obviously didn't count. It's absolutely meaningless. But in terms of the starters, I think at the end of the day, we don't really care about who the starters are, but it makes for good conversation for a few days before the picks are going to be made. I believe on February 7th. So, and when it goes down on your resume, it doesn't say LeBron James All-Star starter or Bradley Beal All-Star starter. It just says All-Star. which means, a guy like Dwayne Wade, Derrick Rose, these sort of guys could still be in there.
Yeah, I mean, Kemba's definitely a surprise. I had Ben Simmons personally as probably the other starter for the guard position.
That Australian love, Jack.
Look, I can't hate. I'd have Beal, but I can't hate.
But I mean, obviously Kemba's hot start, I mean, it caught everybody's attention. I mean, the 60-point game, how he was kind of willing that Hornets team just to stay 500. Obviously, it's died down. And you guys mentioned it before we hopped on live that, it being in Charlotte, that also kind of helps the fact that it gives more reason to have Kemba kind of starting.
Yeah, I agree. I had Ben Simmons and Bradley Beal ahead of him, but the fact it's in Charlotte, obviously they kind of want to represent him there. Do you think
rigged? It's completely rigged. Charlotte, it's Kemba. That's why they made it.
I really think that's a big reason. That's a big reason why. Come on, it's Charlotte. They gotta get their hometown guy in the starting lineup.
Conspiracy theories are plenty.
Yeah, and it's not like Charlotte's having a great season, 23-24. Technically the 7th seed, but nothing super impressive.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Simmons and Bradley Beal, like we talked about, I don't think that those two guys have the sort of kudos and resume behind them to sort of supersede a guy like Kemba Walker. But Kemba Walker's done this plenty of times. He's a multi-time All-Star. Ben Simmons would be there for his first time. Beal is in a similar sort of conversation, but the Washington Wizards have been a train wreck other than when John Wall's been out, funnily enough, and Bradley Beal's been heading the ship. So, I mean, it does make sense, but you could probably roll the dice with those three.
Now, everybody else in the starting lineup in the East is good, right? No complaints from me.
Yeah, no. Antetokounmpo and Embiid, those guys were a lock.
Yeah, I think everybody was pretty much a lock right there. Now, moving on to pretty much the sadder portion of the show. I'm sorry about this, Kory, but we do have to talk about it. Victor Oladipo suffered a ruptured tendon last night in his quad. He's going to be out the rest of the season. Kory, we'll let you go first. Initial thoughts and feelings on this. Playing the violin.
Yeah, it sucks, man. I mean, obviously we are the 3 seed in the East. He was kind of like just getting back from a knee injury. Everybody's playing really well. Now he's gone. The entire season changes. We go from maybe being buyers at the deadline to getting a guy like Mike Conley, perhaps, or some more talent to really make a deep run in the playoffs or to try to make a deep run. And now with Oladipo rupturing the tendon in his quad, which is honestly, this is a serious injury. Like it's so rare that there's not a lot of cases to even base it off in the NBA. Charles Barkley had it late in his career, which ended up ending his career. Tony Parker suffered it last season, or pretty much last season. It took him 7 months to come back. Obviously, he looks okay, but he's older now. So what would he have lost if he was in his prime? So now, and that's a concern. How does Oladipo come back? Oladipo is making $24 million a year. That's a lot locked up into a guy who, if this injury doesn't heal properly, doesn't come back right, the entire franchise is in jeopardy. And obviously, we had Paul George break his leg, right after we got the back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals, and it felt like we were about to take the turn with him about to become a superstar. And obviously, he broke his leg, and everything took a step back. And almost feels like this is that 2.0. Paul George even talked about that today. So. It's dark days right now in Indiana. Now everyone's trying to figure out, what's next.
Yeah, I think with Victor Oladipo, you mentioned, Kory, the fact that, the road to recovery is going to be, a tricky one. But we saw the reformation that he turns his body around into being an absolute stud in this league. And I think that should give him, a heap of confidence in terms of attacking this recovery. I think that there's no one more well-equipped mind, body, and soul than a guy like Victor Oladipo. I think he's more liked than maybe any other player in the league. And I think, we probably say that about everyone, but he's just a nice dude. And he's just a really good guy, really positive. And he was apparently in good spirits. I mean, that's obviously a good start. And I think that he's going to get through this. I have full faith in a guy like Victor Oladipo. Nick and I have sort of experienced some similar sort of, in terms of with the Karis LeVert. Obviously, the news for Victor wasn't as great, but it does leave the Pacers in a very tricky situation, so to speak, because they're pushing for the sort of a home seed in the playoffs, but at the same time, do they make a trade? Are they just going to remain steadfast? Where do they go from here? I mean, I know Kory's Twitter's been blowing up, Pacers Twitter's been blowing up, the trade deadline marathon's going to be going crazy. We'll have to wait and see how it pans out.
Yeah, overall, first off, it just sucks. Like you guys mentioned, the journey for Oladipo to get here, a lot of people thought he was a bust after Orlando. Then he found a place in Indiana and really stuck out and looked like he was really becoming a superstar, like Kory mentioned, coming back from injury. And where they were this season, I think they still surprised a lot of people being a 3 seed and having the potential to have a deep playoff run. Now that's kind of taken away without Oladipo. Now, Kory, do you think they should make a move and try to compete this year, or do you think they should try to sell some of the guys and look forward next season?
I sell personally. Who your cornerstone pieces are. It's Turner, it's Sabonis, it's Oladipo, and I just want to mention, Jack. You're right. If anyone's going to come back from the injury, it's going to be Victor Oladipo. Even today, he always posts on Instagram like a holy script or whatever, some like motivations. And this morning, it was there. Injury or not, he posted the thank God so he's obviously in good spirits at least. He's trying to get through it. But what was the original question? should they trade? Yeah, they should trade. I mean, they got expiring deals. Darren Collison's expiring. Bogdanovic's expiring. These guys can help a contending team or a team that's looking to get to the next level. And realistically, if you're the Pacers, we have a lot of young guys. Is Collison going to really be the starting point guard you want 2 years from now, 3 years from now, when you're actually making a push for a deep playoff run? No. Bogdanovich, probably not. Thaddeus Young is the only guy that I'm like, we can't get rid of. He's got to stay. Last night they kept up the Toronto Raptors. And they beat the Raptors after losing Oladipo. And Thaddeus Young was really the leader on and off the court in between timeouts, keeping that team, focused and driven to get the win. So you can't lose that kind of guy. But everybody else, I think it's up for grabs, and even Tyreke Evans.
I mean, it changes the ceiling for the Pacers. You don't have your best player. Then, I think that they were a rough chance to sort of be within a finals contention, Eastern Conference, and maybe even the NBA Finals. But if you don't have Victor Oladipo, you're not going to be there. So I think selling does make a lot of sense. But at the same time, if Robert Perra and the Grizzlies front office give you a call, Kory, and you're Kevin Pritchard, do you make a deal for a guy like Mike Conley?
All right, so if we acquire a guy like Conley, we're pretty much saying that Oladipo, we're going to show you what we got waiting for you when you come back, and we're going to do everything we can this year, and then next year when you come back healthy, this is what we got. It's Conley, you, Thaddeus Young, Sabonis, Turner, and whoever else at that point fills in the roster.
Yeah, it's a really interesting situation because on one hand, I think you want to keep the culture, you want to keep the mentality you have, make the playoffs and win even without making a move. But on the other hand, like Kory said, a lot of these guys are expiring. Are you keeping them long term, or do you want to try to gather an asset? The Mike Conley situation is very interesting. I'm not sure if I would pull the trigger on that. I might wait to the offseason. The whole Conley thing, I don't know what type of value you're giving up for him.
Right. And also I would say is like you could even trade a couple of the guys and still maybe make the playoffs in the East. It's not like this team could bottom out because of where they are already. Who knows if Aaron Holiday gets more minutes, what kind of player he becomes. And, who knows what Turner gets in a bigger role if they trade up a guy like Bogdanovich who takes a lot of shots, I think they can still be
too.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they could be a playoff team even if they do sell off on some of these guys.
Yeah, I don't think that they're going to drop any further than fifth. As much as I'm high on my Nets, and Nick is pretty high on them as well, probably a lot higher than myself. I don't think that we're in with a greater shot of stealing, them or Boston's sort of spot as a 4 or 5. Obviously with the Spencer Dinwiddie injury as well. So I think the Pacers have firmly solidified themselves in that 3 to 5 range. Obviously, like Kory sort of said, with these injuries, it sort of breeds opportunity for guys like Aaron Holiday, who was really good, if I'm not mistaken, when he has been playing.
Yeah, and really, a lot of energy.
And I think that could be a really nice move. And if you get a Mike Conley, that takes away minutes from a guy like him as well. So it's going to be a fascinating situation how Kevin Pritchard deals with it. He obviously made that Sabonis deal in the first place, was heavily panned, and that panned out quite well for him. He's been making some savvy enough moves. Obviously, the Doug McDermott move. We know Kory could spend the next 15 minutes speaking about that one. So, I mean, they're walking a tightrope here, and it's going to be them and like Memphis and all these sort of teams that are hanging around that mark are going to be, where do they go? There's 2 roads to walk down.
Yeah,
Don't compare us to the Memphis Grizzlies.
It was just a tease in my head.
No. I'm not allowing that one. No.
You try to slide it in there. But yeah, and the trade deadline's popping up real quick. So it's like they have to make a decision over the next couple of weeks. Any final thoughts on Oladipo or the Pacers before we move on?
Nope.
Kory's just choking on water.
He's choking up, guys. I mean, come on. It's his favorite player for his favorite team. I mean, Nick and I were crying and swearing when Caris LeVert was injured. So this is
I've been walking outside of my body all day.
Did you shed a tear last night? Tell the truth.
No, I actually dropped my phone though. Like I was like sitting in my phone and like it happened. I just dropped it in my lap. I was stunned. I just stared at the screen for a solid 5 minutes.
There's like group therapy for Kory.
We can find you a Pacers like message board or something. Now,
just something on Reddit.
Final question, I guess, on that. How nervous are you guys that this is going to impact Oladipo long term and kind of take away some of his explosiveness?
I mean, not to be a pessimist, but like Kory was mentioning with the other players that have suffered this injury, it's a similar sort of thing with DeMarcus Cousins and the Achilles injury. You know, that sort of injury for a big guy, whereas a quad injury that is so rare and so serious, obviously it's going to be impactful and it's going to be worrisome, but you have to have full faith in the medical staff and you have to have full faith in a guy like Victor Oladipo to just do all the right things along the way. There's bound to be some setbacks. You know, plenty of guys have undergone serious injuries and got back to their best selves. You know, I always like to think of Rudy Gay as the sort of unsung hero in that sort of sense. Paul George, obviously, when Kory was mentioning Paul George earlier, you know, there's been some guys who haven't been as lucky. You know, a guy like Gordon Hayward who's still struggling with his comeback. But I have full faith in Victor Oladipo. Like I mentioned, I'm going to reiterate that. It's going to be worrisome, but, you know, I think we give it time along the way before we sort of get too hyperbolic about our takes and, you know, the fact that he's not doing certain things and about, he shouldn't have been playing in the first place, all this sort of stuff. You know, it is what it is, and we deal with, and hopefully we wish Vic all the best. Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think it's cause for some concern. I mean, it's only happened not even a handful of times in the NBA. So, and he's a younger guy. Obviously, as you mentioned, Jack, explosiveness is a big part of his game, and that's your quads and that part of your hamstrings. That's crucial for guys like him. So I think it's definitely worrisome. Obviously, if anyone's going to come back from it, if anyone's going to get back to tip-top shape and be the player he once was, probably going to be a guy like Oladipo. He's got that kind of work ethic, that kind of heart to him. But it's definitely worrisome. I'm not gonna lie, but then a guy like Russell Westbrook, that dude's had like 5 knee surgeries. I'm watching him jump out of the gym. So who knows? It's all about the human body, really, how your body can recover and all that. But I got some faith, but it's worrisome.
Yeah, it is worrisome, but obviously the medical field has taken leaps and bounds since even some of these other guys, they're making, new strides every single day. So that's a positive. And I think another positive too is Oladipo's improved a lot in terms of his skill. He's not just a pure athlete like he was when he came out in the draft. He actually has some skill to his game. His jump shot has really developed. So I think he'll be okay. He maybe won't get to 100% athleticism, but I still think he'll be an all-star player as long as everything kind of goes right. Now, talking about the other injury Jack mentioned, Spencer Dinwiddie is dealing with a ligament injury to his thumb. We're not sure the exact details yet. The first report was 4 to 6 weeks. Now there's another examination coming tomorrow to kind of confirm that. Initial thoughts about Dinwiddie being out, Jack?
It's the timing couldn't be worse. I mean, no injury is timed well, but with Spencer Dinwiddie's injury, he had an absolutely sensational game. Did a bit of a breakdown for Nets Republic about it, and then following the game, we see this news just pop out of nowhere. I obviously Nick and I slide in each other's DMs on the regular, and I got him like, oh man, this is pretty crappy, to put it lightly. And Caron Butler reported the news, a former teammate of his in Detroit. So maybe that's how the news was broken. Maybe, Spencer's just keeping in touch with his mate, just going, oh, yeah, I'm heading to see a specialist or see a surgeon of some sort. Who knows? But we know the Brooklyn Nets don't like to tweet out timelines or anything of that sort. So until anything is confirmed by guys like Woj and Shams has sort of been more definitive in his sort of rumors in that sort of a sense, but just Woj has been a little bit more tentative. Obviously, we know the Woj and Shams battle. So it's obviously going to be a tough stretch for the Nets, who are obviously suffering plenty of injuries as we speak. But it's obviously, Spencer Dinwiddie was probably the favorite for Sixth Man of the Year. So it's probably going to hurt those claims at the same time. Probably gives it to Kory's boy Domantas Sabonis. So a lot of real working pieces around this injury for Spencer Dinwiddie.
Yeah, I mean, we both, all of us, are in the same boat of mourning players. Yeah,
you're not dead, Kory. Come on.
All right, sorry, just my season I'm sorry. So obviously the Nets have been one of the hottest teams in the NBA. We mentioned on the last episode of the NBA Outlet, they have one of the fifth hardest schedule to end the season. Losing Dinwiddie is just not good, obviously. And also I saw so many like Dragon Ball Z like gifs of like D'Lo's face and Dinwiddie's face the last couple of days, and the killer to killer post. Like, to have this happen after I just got so hyped too is just such a downer. But I mean, the Nets are resilient. They've shown that all year. It doesn't matter who goes down. It's the next man up mentality. So I think they're going to keep scrapping. So I'm not overly concerned. The teams underneath them, like, the Pistons last night, I mean, that was really cringy, and they're just a bad team. And then the Hornets, they're not coming. So I think the Nets can withstand this, but it's definitely a big definitely a big loss if he's out long term.
Yeah, obviously we're waiting for the final details, but like you said, both you guys said, it sucks. And also I feel like D'Lo and Dinwiddie's chemistry on and off the court was at an all-time high. Not only just like the pictures, the Instagram posts and whatever, but on the court, I'm sure their plus minus over the last month has been a lot better. And Jack and I mentioned on the buzz, this has probably been an injury that's been bothering Dinwiddie a little bit for over the last month. He's been wearing that bandage for a couple weeks now over his thumb. Then last night, Jack posted a video clip on Twitter. He took a hard fall in the fourth quarter of that game against Orlando, kind of got up, grabbing his thumb, still hit some shots later in that game. So there is a chance maybe that he'll play through it, but we know the Nets are super conservative when it comes to player injuries. Obviously, Karis LeVert being out, hopefully he can come back sooner. Jack and I have kind of talked about Shabazz Napier really needing to step up, especially with all the injuries across the board. It's not only Dinwiddie, it's Karis LeVert, it's Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, it's Jared Dudley, it's Shana Musa, Alan Crabb. There's just a ton of guys out. So it's going to be a lot of resiliency from this team, and you wouldn't expect anything less from them.
Yeah, I think Brian Lewis also posted out that he saw at the training center Coach Kenny and Shabazz having some one-on-one training. So we can obviously expect some elevated minutes for Shabazz Napier. This is what he's brought in for. He's had those sort of mini spurts here and there, and he's had some great games. I know Kory's been on a few pods on the buzz, replacing me at times, and he's had those good games. So I think that the Nets' depth is going to be tested, but this is what depth is for. Whether this increases the likelihood in terms of, the Nets wanting to make a move. They're obviously in the market in terms of Woj reporting their buyers. But at the same time, do you really want to add another guard and make it 4 guards on the roster, or do you just want to get another body in there just to change the rotations a little bit? Because, D'Lo I think D'Lo's, with his form right now and the way that he's been holding down the team, I have utmost confidence in him. He always does it. He has looked a lot better though, especially in that last game against the Magic when both of them were on the floor. They were just balling. And the fact that Spencer Dinwiddie hit that insane 3, like that contested wild 3 with that finger injury. And for those that haven't seen it, the video is on at the JManJBT on my Twitter. It's insane. The resiliency and the toughness of some of these guys. It's something to behold.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of bounce back. Like Kory said, the guys behind them in terms of the playoff race aren't necessarily killing it right now, but the Nets do have a tough schedule coming up, so it's going to be guys stepping up, especially Shabazz. But any other final thoughts on the Nets of what's going to happen from here on out?
We'll probably have a buzz, maybe a cheeky little buzz coming at you, but we'll keep you posted.
Yeah, and he means Brooklyn Buzz for you that don't know. You can check us out, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, NetsRepublic.com, YouTube, and that's about it. But on to tonight's games, guys. We're going to talk a little bit about the storylines more so than the actual games. Obviously we got Golden State 33-14 matching up with Washington 20-26, pretty much complete opposites. Golden State's pretty much hitting their peak right now. DeMarcus Cousins is making his return. Do you think Golden State is pretty much that scary team we envisioned in the summer? No one's going to beat them. They're still the favorites. No one really has a chance.
Yeah, the Washington Wizards are going to be Ariana Grande tonight. Thank you, next.
Well, I'm just saying more so, Jack, in terms of the entire NBA when it comes to the playoffs. Do you think the Warriors?
I think the whole NBA could be Ariana Grande. Thank you, next. Just like the next championship. It's them versus the field. Like that's the the common question going around, who would you rather take? I think the Golden State, early in the season, everyone's like, oh, well, the Raptors have been really good. Denver's been all right. Or LeBron's healthy. No, it's Golden State. And this behemoth is going to be what it is until, free agency or trades or Kevin Durant leaving or whatever happens. I think, in terms of what we sort of say, you have to appreciate certain things in the NBA, players when they're healthy, obviously we've seen that and talked about that today, but dynasties are pretty cool. I know we all love to hate on Golden State, but at the same time, it's a pretty important run, and we're going to look back on this as a pretty historic time in the league.
Yeah, man, I think without question, Cousins coming back, they're now back to being 1A and everyone else is falling behind. And this is, like you mentioned, Jack, this is history. I mean, we're seeing greatness. This is like the Jordan Bulls. I mean, this type of stuff is never seen. They're going for a three-peat. If they get the three-peat, they can possibly go for a four-peat, which would be, I think, the first time ever in NBA history. Maybe I think the Celtics might have done it back in the day. But, this is definitely greatness. And, yeah, I don't think they're going to slow down. They're probably only going to get better at this point. And as you mentioned, Jack, this is something that we should all be enjoying. Even though I don't like them, this is something we should enjoy.
Yeah, I actually don't hate the Warriors at all. Like Jack said, I kind of enjoy it. I appreciate the greatness. My team's not close to winning a championship, so I could really care less. Maybe if I was a Rockets fan, I'd be upset, but they're pretty much the favorites from here on out. Cousins going to find his rhythm. Even if they were to have one injury to one of their stars, they're still the favorite in my eyes, unless somebody makes a blockbuster move at the deadline. If you guys had to say which team would give them the best run for their money in terms of the finals or the Western Conference Finals right now?
Toronto Raptors for me. I just think that when you have a healthy Kawhi Leonard, he was probably the last guy to give them a real scare, outside of the Houston Rockets. I think we probably have somewhat short memories in the sense that he was insane against them before, Zaza did his thing. So I'm going the Raptors, but at the same time, the whole resting thing that's happening in Toronto right now, is that a sign of more serious things? I don't know, but I've got some faith in Toronto, and I think that they're probably there. But in the West, you could roll the dice.
Milwaukee Bucks.
They haven't done anything in the playoffs yet, bro.
Hey, not yet. It's all right.
I will say one thing that really hurts the Bucks, and this is coming from a player that Jack and I both like very much for his time with the Nets, but Brook Lopez would get thoroughly exposed by the Warriors. Imagine him trying to chase Steph Curry off of a screen or something like that, and that's a big component of how they play. Obviously, they have different matchups they could throw out there. I think Milwaukee would still need to add at least one more solid rotation piece or like a fringe-type all-star. We've had some crazy trades throwing Bradley Beal over to Milwaukee on the OTG trade deadline marathon. I also like Toronto. I like Toronto because of their defensive versatility. Having guys like Kawhi, Pascal Siakam, OG, Kyle Lowry's a good defender, Fred VanVleet's a good defender, Danny Green. They have a lot of different guys that can score the ball too. So I like Toronto right now as the only team that could maybe do something. And if Boston ever got things going right, I think they would have some type of, chance, just because they have so much depth and they have so many good pieces. But right now their chemistry is just all over the place.
Yeah, if Boston had any sort of consistency, they would definitely be a threat.
And if Al Horford was like he just doesn't seem himself.
No. Actually, he's looked better as of late. He's actually looked better, I think. This last stretch, I've been watching a lot more Celtics, and he looks okay. It's really Jaylen Brown. I don't know. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Tatum is not good. I don't know what happened to him. He is not a good ball player right now, at least offensively.
Spicy. I wonder who he was training with. One of your favorite players this summer.
Yeah, no, it's a sabotage. He screwed him up on purpose. Celtics-Lakers rivalry runs deep. All conspiracy theories today. All conspiracy.
Love it.
On the Washington side, we kind of hinted at this a little bit. Should they go for the playoffs? Should they tank? Should they blow it up? Should they trade Bradley Beal? What's up with Washington?
I mean, we talked about it on JBT this week, and Nick in Wizards Woes, new segment, Ted Leonsis has said that they're not going to tank. They're just not going to do it. And so they're not doing that. They're going to be going for the playoffs. I think that they're good enough. And when you have a player of Bradley Beal's caliber, you're going to be a playoff or near playoff team. Him versus Blake versus Kemba versus the collective of Miami versus D'Lo and the rest. Bradley Beal has a good enough claim to drag his hand to the playoffs. It's just going to be the timing, and they're going to have to continue because they've been pretty good of late. So I think that they should keep fighting because Yeah, the owners get that playoff money, that sweet playoff cash.
And they don't sell many tickets there.
No.
I mean, realistically, they should blow it up, but they're not going to do that. I mean, Ariza's played really well for them. Beal, as we know, as we've been talking about, I mean, he's big time. Otto Porter Jr., it looks like they still want to move him, but I do think they're going to try and go for a playoff spot. It just feels like that's what they're going to do.
All right, guys, we are running out of time. I do have a couple questions, so you're going to hit me with a yes or no.
All right.
So moving on, we got the different matchups tonight. Obviously, New Orleans, OKC, Portland, and Phoenix, Minnesota, and the Lakers. So the New Orleans Pelicans are in the danger zone.
Yes.
Okay, both agree on that, and I agree as well. Obviously, they need to keep AD. Paul George is a top 10 player this year.
Yes.
Well, actually, we just have to get a quick little segment in here, and I heard this on Falaxis Hoops, and I just want to hear Jack's thoughts on it. James Harden is the second best player in the NBA this season.
Yes.
Kory's happy. That was his take on Falaxis Hoops. I think I would agree with it because you can't really defend James Harden all this year.
Top 50 coming soon, ladies and gents.
He's crazy. All right. Josh Jackson is a bust.
No.
Yes.
Ooh. We could. What are some thoughts on that? We could get in the yes and no. I'll skip it just for a second.
He's averaging a historic 35, 27, and 63 or something. I don't know. Something not
terrible.
Good. He's not a good basketballer. And he shows these flashes that's like he's going to go down in the mold of a Stanley Johnson or Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. And that doesn't, bust is such a, obviously a generic term, but he's just not a good basketballer. He's a solid-ish and has a solid-ish ceiling. If you want to compare him to what he should be, he has great athleticism, but I don't think he's ever going to reach that, let alone in Phoenix. If he were to get traded to a good player development team and maybe like a Nets. Literally the only one that really comes to mind. But he's got bust with maybe not a capital B, but a nice cursive lowercase b.
I think he'll be okay. I think he's another guy who changed scenery. I just think he just doesn't work out with Phoenix. But I mean, he's got a lot of raw potential. It just is it going to become anything? High flyer, really athletic. But I got faith in him. I watched him the other night. He showed some glimpses.
Yeah, I think there's still some potential. Change of scenery really works. Another team that I like the way they're developing players. Obviously, it's only been 1 year with Lloyd Pierce, but Atlanta, keep an eye on them. I think player development coaches, I mentioned this. I don't know if it was on air to one of you guys, but I think that's going to be the new trend moving forward, especially for rebuilding teams. On to some other questions. Who needs to win more tonight, Minnesota or the Lakers?
Lakers.
All right. Are you concerned about LeBron's health?
No.
Yes.
Let's talk about it. Let's get a conversation here. Dialogue.
Well, what are you, like a therapist? I mean, this is where we're
let me lean my chair back. We're gonna give a little session here.
This is some marriage counseling ish right here. I mean, you have to be concerned with this groin injury because LeBron is superhuman. So when LeBron is out for longer than a game, it's something serious. And obviously there's the rumors that have floated around in terms of them saying, well, if it was the playoffs, he'd be playing. Well, at the same time, they kind of really need him now with Lonzo out at the same time. So if it was really that important, he would be playing. I don't think he should sacrifice his body and this sort of malaise of a season, this in-between season. So it worries me, but only because I want to see LeBron at his best health. My worries come from a good place.
Real concern, sincere.
Yeah.
I feel it, even across the world.
I'm not worried. I'm not really worried. I mean, I think you're being cautious.
Are you more worried about the Lakers or LeBron?
Lakers. I'm more worried about the team around LeBron than LeBron. LeBron's going to be LeBron. All things could say he comes back and 2 or 3 weeks later something else gets hurt or he gets hurt. If he gets hurt at any point the rest of the season again and has to miss time, I'm concerned.
Going slinger.
And LeBron never gets hurt more than once in a year to begin with. So that would be concerning because we saw how fast Kobe's body went underneath him. It felt like 1 minute he was Kobe, the next minute he was done.
That LA Sun.
Yeah. Yes, the LA Heat.
Undefeated.
So I'm not really worried. I'm more worried about the Lakers and obviously the lack of progression for some of these young guys.
All right, guys, let's just get your picks for the games tonight before we get out of here. Golden State, Washington, and a real tight one, right?
Next.
Next. Wizards winning, right?
Just a quick little tidbit for this one. Last time they match up, Steph dropped 51. He didn't even have to play the whole fourth quarter. So maybe we could see another historical scoring night from a Warrior. Pelicans, OKC. And let me mention, no AD, no Julius Randle.
Yeah, Okafor, though. And Mirotic, please.
Okafor's been balling, Jack. He held out the last game. He had, I think, 5 blocks.
He had back-to-back double-doubles.
I had a discussion with the person that's like, we should bring him back as a 4 to Brooklyn. I'm just like, dude. And he was very receptive. He or she was very receptive in that sense. But it's OKC here. I mean, they would have to blow it. And I believe that there's been some recent Mirotic news that could have him out even longer. So the season's falling apart for New Orleans. And bring on Seattle, please.
Yeah. Just a quick tidbit, and I guess in there, AD will be traded this summer.
Nah. Oh, this summer, yeah.
And no.
You said when I was in that room with Nick, you said like 100% yes.
Yeah.
Like 3 weeks later, you just no.
Nah, it's a yes. He's done. I mean, come on. Look what we're talking about. No more injuries. That team is falling apart. And every time I hear like Pelican guys talk, they're just like, no, he's not leaving. And it makes you think like, what do they know that I'm not like seeing that all these Pelican guys don't think he's leaving?
I mean, sometimes you got to lie to yourself so you feel good for the rest of the year.
I guess.
I think he's leaving too, especially if they like miss the playoffs by a good chunk. If they just miss out and they deal with a lot of injuries, maybe they can convince him to stay. But then you take the risk of not getting anything for him or losing all leverage at the trade deadline and getting terrible assets.
Yeah.
So, Portland, Phoenix.
Portland.
Big surprise there. Minnesota, LA, Lakers.
I'm on the Lakers. I think that. I don't know. There's these random bounce back games that the Lakers have. You know, we saw it against OKC. I think that they're due for one of those, despite all the injuries. You know, Michael Beasley's going to put up like a triple-double or something. Who knows what might happen there? Zubac is going to be like,
you got to come back to the U.S. tomorrow.
Oh, man. Zubac will probably put up like a Kareem-like numbers at the same time. You know, he's been nice, though. I'm not going to hate on Zubac. So, yeah, I'm going to go with the cheeky Lakers pick.
Minnesota. Going Minnesota.
Cat Daddy's having a big game?
Yeah, I think so. What's the line? You want to bet, Jack? Come on, let's get a little action. What's the line?
How are we going to make this transaction official?
Thousands of miles. PayPal works.
OTG
Venmo.
coin. I don't know. We got OTG coins yet? What do we got?
Well, I do have my shirt on for you that can't see, so I came prepared. The line on the game is Lakers by 1 point, and they're at home, so that's not really much of a big line at all.
That's not a line. That's a number.
That's terrible.
Yeah. So, last quick question, I guess: is Cat back to having your confidence and turning to a really great player, or are you still concerned about him being, a top 10, top 15 player in the future?
He never lost it from me. I think that the change of coach, he was still very good. He learned some things under Tom Thibodeau, but I think that we sort of talked about, player development coaches. I think Flip Saunders, we don't necessarily know what he is as a coach yet, but I think that he seems to mesh well from him in just the general vibe that I get. And I think Karl Anthony Towns is, the whole Towns Jokic debate, we debated over it for many a time when we were doing the top 50. But I think Towns is a transcendent player and is going to go down as one of the best centers of all time.
Yeah, I'm not worried. With him being back to being the alpha of that team, I mean, he's showing it. The other night, he had like 4 points at halftime, and I was like, wow, like what's going on with Towns? And I think he finished with like 34 or something, He's an entirely explosive offensive player from the center position. The defense, whether or not that becomes, a true part of his game, he's still a decent rim protector for whatever it's worth, just a little bit awkward on defense. But I really do like his game, and, they're really playing hard for Ryan Saunders right now. So,
yeah,
that's been helping too.
I think the defense has been better since Butler's been gone. I also think that there's still a little something for Towns and sometimes needing to flip the switch where you mentioned like the 4 points. Like he needs to learn to be able to do that consistently for a game. I know there's another game where he had like 24 at the half. He finished with like 28 for the game. You need to find a way to consistently kind of impact and attack. But when he's attacking, I've seen a couple games late for Minnesota. They might have lost the games, but he's really grinding on both ends of the floor. So I have a lot of confidence in him being back to the player that we expected, draft time for him. But guys, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I like doing this. I like seeing your faces. Friendly faces.
I like seeing you guys too. It's just fun.
This is a real ego booster right now. But I'll talk to you guys later. As always, a pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Check us out, iTunes, Block Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, Dash Radio, and YouTube.
He's got to go